being here. Make sure you sign in. I know some of you are here, but you forgot to sign in because you were being issued your laptop, which will be, and your iPad, which we will be talking about a little bit later.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Robert Forty, and I am an educator of 26 years. Currently, I am a counselor at Chapin High School in El Paso ISD. As my wife had shared with you all, I've been a district admin, so I was assistant director of PEMS and data for San Antonio ISD. We had roughly about 52,000 students in over 100 campuses that I oversaw. I've worked as a biology teacher, life science teacher, coach. I've coached 3 sports, track, powerlifting, or Olympic Federation strength coach, and football. The reason this presentation came about, I have to go back to year 2. Year 1, I started at Cathedral High School. I got a call, came down, I was living in Arizona. That one went pretty much as planned. It was a pretty simple course. It was IPC, it was a lot of the boys. It was pretty simple. I didn't have a lot of issues with that year. And it was at Cathedral Private School. It seemed to fit me and it seemed to fit my calling. But then when I went back to Arizona and started working over there, I was at Mesa High School in Mesa, Arizona. And Mesa High School is a really big school. And surprisingly enough, though, at the time, they didn't have a whole lot of bilingual teachers. And I wouldn't even consider myself fully bilingual, but because I spoke a little Spanish and because I was new and because I was a big guy, I was a lot bigger then, they said, we're going to give you life science, Mr. Forty, and we're going to take away all the monolingual Spanish-speaking kids and give them to you. Oh, and by the way, since life science is a pretty easy curriculum, we're going to give you all the special ed kids. Never mind the fact that there was no book, there was no curriculum, there was nothing. I had to write it as I was going. And by the way, we're going to also ask you if you'd please coach on your prep. So you will go all day, no break, teach a subject that doesn't have a curriculum, and we want you to be amazing at it. So that year I had 87 monolingual Spanish-speaking students. I had an additional 53 students that were special ed, and when I say special ed, we're talking about cerebral palsy, Tourette's, what we would consider in Texas, or I don't know about in New Mexico, kind of our alt students, the students that were really, really low, had a lot of functional issues. They gave them to me as well, which was great. And then any other student that had had some troubles and was lacking a science credit, I got them. You take care of them. Now imagine this is year 2 for me, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I felt like I was up to the challenge. Now, I have to say this, I had really good role models. I come from a long line of educators. My mom and my dad in El Paso ISD, in Canotillo, in Cathedral, in Socorro, they worked all over the city for 43 years. Parochial, private, you name it, they coached and taught in it. They were great teachers, great role models. I can't go a day without somebody saying, oh, you're Big Rudy's son, or you're Bobby Jean's son, which was great. So I thought I could handle this task when I started back, and this was in 1999. Well, I didn't handle it very well. I was struggling. I really had a hard time connecting with the kids. I really had a hard time getting them to comply and do things. I was spending lots of money trying to find incentives. And more importantly, the thing that really was bothering me the most was I really had a passion to help these kids. I just described the student population that I got. And so I wanted nothing more to prove people wrong, have them prove people wrong. So I put my heart and soul into everything I did. Now, I'm going to get emotional because I always do at this point. I've done this presentation a number of times. I did it all over the state of Texas. I've done it at a national conference and here with you all today. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that it still bothers me. 26 years later. My wife and I were driving. We were in Phoenix, Arizona. We're driving. We stopped at one of our local fast food restaurants. And at the window was a young lady that had graduated after that first year that I taught. Yahida was her name, and she saw me and immediately recognized me, and she was surprised to see me. I was like, hi, Mia, how are you? She's like, good, Mr. Forti. We thought you died. You thought I died? Why? Well, you were so mad all the time. Everybody started thinking you had a heart attack and died. I was like, I wasn't mad. Yeah, you seem kind of mad a lot, Mr. Forti. And I said, well, I just loved you guys. I just wanted you to do really well. And then as she's handing me my order right through the window, she stops and she says, you know what, Mr. Forti, do you know what we used to call you? I thought, this is a loaded question. I don't know if I want to know the answer. What, Mija? What did you used to call me? We used to call you el gritón, the screamer, the shouter. That's all you did. That still bothers me. It bothers me because I loved those kids. I wanted them to genuinely succeed and do well. I really did. With all my heart. But they didn't get that. That's not what they got. All they got, all they saw, all they remembered was the screamer, the shouter. The guy that was so mad they thought he had a heart attack and died. I mean, that didn't sit well with me. And here I had these beautiful role models that I was trying to emulate, and I didn't get it right. Something was wrong. Something was amiss. And I remember, like it was yesterday, we immediately pulled off after we pulled out of this one area. We stopped into the parking lot, and my wife says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not okay. I'm not okay because at least I thought that they would get my love through all of that hard, rough, gruff, old school mentality, and they didn't. So I had a choice right then and there. I either make a change or I get out of education. Well, I'm 26 years later, I'm still in education, so I had to make a change. Now, what changed was this. As I was teaching biology and life sciences, I had come across a video about Dr. Deborah Youngland Todd, this doctor that had been doing functional MRI scans of adolescents back in the 90s. And she was finding out the differences and understandings of the adolescent brain and why they were so different. And then that just kept snowballing and leading to more exploration on my part. Then I saw Dr. Jay Geed and a whole host of other nationally recognized doctors and scientists that have really studied the adolescent brain. And then from that, I wrote my thesis on the adolescent brain and trying to make a communication, breach the gap, knowing what I knew about functional MRIs, about how their brains develop, those types of things. And in the end, it worked. Now, it's still a work in progress for me. It's going to be that way for all of us because, you know, we're adults. We don't think like kids anymore, but at least I can understand them better and I can approach them better. And that's where this presentation comes from, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. The pieces that changed my life. And what you're going to see is a lot of stuff that's not mine. There's a lot of stuff that is, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm just pulling together to really help you make better connections with your students. When you're talking about MLSS, you apply some of these pieces to that entire process so that you know how to continue the improvement process for this child. And you'll be surprised, some of these things that we're going to talk about, some of you do naturally, and some of you just need to be reminded. And for some of us, as you take this back, and that's my hope that you take it back to your campuses, you can remind some other educators, hey, you're not helping, you're not encouraging, let's try a different approach. It's not to scold, it's not to reprimand, but it's to help us all do what we set out to do in the first place, which was impact the lives of these kids. And that's why this is the why. This is the why. It's the why because why do their brains do what they do? Why do they do what they do? Why do we need to do a different approach? There's a lot of whys that we're going to try to answer here today. Okay? So there's going to be some videos, some different clips. If there's something that catches you and you have a question, stop me at any time, raise your hand, and I'll answer the question to the best of my ability. All right. We're not going to get too technical, and I know there's a lot of writing, and I don't expect you guys to read it. As I present this, as I've done this presentation a number of times, I try to provide this to you guys in a different resource, but I want this there so that it's a reminder to me of what we're trying to get across. First, let's talk about the science. So this is what we know. Let's talk about brain to begin with. The brain, one of the parts of the brain is the first to develop, and it's part of our primitive brain. It's called the amygdala, and it's that little almond-shaped piece that's right here. Now, that amygdala is responsible for our fight and flight. It is the area of the brain that adolescents are going to rely on more than anything else because as they're developing, as they're growing, they need to keep themselves safe. Well, they're not going to know how to do that in a rational system, in a rational way. If we see somebody come in here dressed up in a costume with a knife or a gun acting out of play, we would probably be able to recognize that a little bit quicker and react accordingly and in a responsible way. But an adolescent may not, because their frontal cortex, this part of the brain up here, is the last part to develop. Now, let's go back in just a second. By the age of 3, all children, all people, 90% of the growth of their brain, the actual size of the brain has been reached. By the age of 3, that's early on. But the maturation of the brain, the actual maturity of the brain and the brain and the cells within the brain continues to happen and process all the way. Some of you are saying 25. Recent data shows as late as 28, maybe even into the early 30s, and for some, maybe never. We know a few people like that, right? So this is so important because if this is the last part for an adolescent to develop, they're not going to be able to rationalize, goal set, and do a lot of things very well, which means that when we have conversations with them about such topics, they won't have an understanding. They won't know how to do it, right? So we have to help them with that piece. Plus, if we understand that if they're processing from the amygdala primarily, particularly in situations where they feel threatened or scared or very, very anxious, then they're going to react in a very anxious, scared, or threatening manner. In fact, the amygdala, because it's part of the fight or flight response, can fire up to 2.5 times faster than the frontal cortex. So take into consideration the part of the brain that helps you recognize the situation, plan out, understand what you need to do is the last to develop. So they're hardwired to go from 0 to 1,000 in an instant, are they not? You guys have seen it, right? 1 minute you're having a conversation with them, everything's going fine, and the next minute they're telling you some things that you wouldn't want a sailor to tell you, right? So that's the gist of some of the neuroscience, if you will. I'm not an expert, but it just helps us to understand as we go through the presentations. Now, on this next slide, any questions so far? We're good? Now, on this slide, what I'm going to show you guys is the videos. This first video is what led me to my thesis, is what led me to change my perception and my approach with these students. It's a little old, but the science still holds true. And I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. And then the second video is an extension of that science done by a different doctor, Dr. Jay Geed. So the first one you'll hear from Dr. Deborah Younglin-Todd.
Remain. But that's just part of the story. There's a lot more going on inside the teen brain, though at times it seems like
you don't really know where you're going to go until that minute, and you end up somewhere.
You can't blame like what you want to do on the weekends because you think I have.
I just wanted to do it. Just because of love. It's probably like, it's like.
One day I said, let's do it, so I just did it. Randomness is sometimes so exciting.
recently science has confirmed what parents have suspected for eons. The teen brain really is different. Dr. Younglin-Todd has observed some profound differences in how teens and adults process emotional information.
Essentially, when we compared adult brains to teenage brains, what we found was that adults use their frontal cortex to process information, whereas teenagers use an older part of the brain, the amygdala, to process information.
The amygdala was one of the early structures to develop as our brains evolved. It's where instinctive reactions, such as anger and fear, reside. It may not be surprising that the teen brain uses it much more than the adult brain does. As we mature, stronger connections are made among the different structures in our brains. The instinctive reactions of the amygdala become tempered by the frontal cortex, which is the human brain's crowning achievement. It's where planning, reason, and moral judgment reside. An active frontal cortex is a sign of both emotional maturity and intelligence. So, what would the brain of a genius look like? And what if he was a teenager? We brought child prodigy Michael Carney to Boston, along with his father, for a unique test. No one had looked inside the working brain of a genius before. Would Younglin-Todd see more connections or cortical area? And would his brain function more like an adult or a teenager? He's been called one in a billion. In 1994, Michael was the youngest person ever to graduate from college, the tender age of 10. It was his third of 4 Guinness World Records.
Michael Kevin Purdy, cum laude. I was the youngest person to graduate from high school at 6. Also at 6, I was the youngest person to enter college. At 10, the youngest person to graduate from college, and at 14, I was the youngest person with a master's degree. It's I'm a 32-bit kid in an 8-bit world. I've always had to balance the adult and the child side. I still play video games, read comic books, all that sort of real regular kid stuff. It's sort of odd because when I do act normal, when I do act like a And then when I act adult, they say, oh, you have no social life.
Michael is what's known as an omnibus prodigy. He excels at whatever he sets his mind to. His IQ goes beyond anything measurable. When we took Michael to see Dr. Jurgelin Todd, she wasn't quite sure what she'd see.
One question we'd like to be able to answer is, how is a genius different than a normal in terms of brain processing? And one way that we think this might occur is that the networks, that the brain connections are different in individuals who are gifted or exceptional.
The team will give Michael different kinds of tasks and then record what areas of his brain become active. With his impressive mental abilities, they expect his frontal lobe to override the more emotional reactions of his amygdala.
How you doing, Michael?
Okay.
Okay, Michael, the table will move now.
Okay. They start by asking Michael to name as many words as he can that start with a given letter, which utilizes his intellect. But wrong. He does extremely well.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Okay.
Okay, it's just going to be a minute. I need to look at these.
Next, he looks at photographs of people and interprets the emotion on their faces. This one requires more subjective judgment, and Michael has some trouble. Annoying? The results of Michael's tests led Jurgelin Todd to some intriguing observations.
The emotional task showed that he performed very much like a typical adolescent, and that is, his amygdala activated, but his frontal lobes did not significantly activate. Whereas when we asked him to carry out a word production task, Michael completed this task predominantly with his frontal lobes. So on the task that was more cognitive, he was very adult looking, and on the task that was very emotional, he looked very much like an adolescent. We really don't know why Michael is as bright as he is, why he can process information as quickly as he can. We can certainly say that the percentage of brain volume that includes frontal cortex is greater, so perhaps he has more network capacity in that region of the brain.
So, we all have encountered students that are brilliant, gifted, right? But sometimes they don't always know how to react to a situation. But here's the thing. When we have students that are gifted and talented and really good in the school, we think that they are on an adult level. But here you can clearly see they're really not at an adult level. They may be able to process the hard work that they have to do a little bit better than most, above the average. But their emotional side is still very adolescent-like. And so that was a huge takeaway from me, right? And at that point, I started asking, there's something else. I've got to change how I'm interacting with these kids. And I'm going to come back to that and explain a little bit more. I want to show you the next video. And the next video talks a little bit more about the maturation. And then I will relay back to you why this is so important as we go through this understanding.
The question prompted my trip to the National Institutes of Health, where Jay Yeed has some key collaborators in his explorations of the adolescent brain.
My son Jordan. My daughter Sasha. My children and study participants. So
You've been scanning that.
yes, I've been watching their brains grow and develop through the years.
From what age?
From 3 and from 5.
I'm really eager to look inside your brain. Is one of you going to be able to show us your brain today?
I will.
Okay, great. So let's take a look and put them in the scanner. That'd be great. This is Jordan's 10th time at his father's scanner. His sister Sasha has been scanned over 20 times. And together they've contributed to an unprecedented picture of how the makeup of a young brain changes as it matures. Can you show me how that changed in Jordan's brain over the years?
We can from
You've been scanning him for a long time now.
So this
What age did he start?
So this it goes from ages 3 to 25, and it's actually combining people of across different
So
chunks.
this is not just Jordan.
Right, but it's actually a part of it. Art is actually in this one, and what we see in these colors is blue can be seen as maturation in the sense it's getting closer to the adult brain. And attention to is this part of the brain right here.
Here?
Yeah, the last to turn blue.
Right.
And this is a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, and involved in impulse control, long-range planning, the kind of the hard stuff, integrating everything to make
That's
decisions.
the part that should come in first. The maturation of the adolescent brain involves the pruning away of its gray matter, the nerve cells themselves, and the growing of its white matter, which is the cabling that connects the nerve cells. The cables themselves get better as they become wrapped with insulation called myelin, enabling them to transmit information hundreds of times faster. It's this improved connectivity of fewer, more specialized nerve cells that makes a brain mature, with the crucial decision-making front of the brain the last to join in. Now, where would Sasha be along this? Sasha, you're a couple of years older.
Yeah, 19, 2 years older.
Yeah, so I think 2.5 years apart. The twist on this, though, is that females tend to hit these peaks about 2 years earlier than males as well. So for Sasha, we need to go a little bit further than 2 years. And so we still see a little bit of non-blue in these areas, but it is farther along.
Sasha, do you have this picture on your Facebook?
But it is interesting as well that these are averages.
Yeah.
And both in brain and in behavior, we see some young people, 12, 34, that are very responsible, not impulsive, make good decisions, and we see people our age or older who never pick that up.
So the maturation process is real important to understand too. When I was looking at this as I was developing the presentation, I had to change my approach because I started to understand at a deeper level that they don't get me when I'm being just hard and rough. They're not going to pull from that my love for them or my desires for them because their brains are not wired in the same way that my brain is. There's no way that they could truly pull that in. Now, some kids can, and like you heard Dr. Jay Geed say, those are averages. So, some of my rapport, some of my little rough, attitude with kids seemed to work okay, but for the most, it didn't. In fact, they would shut me down. I sent my thesis to Dr. Deborah Youngland-Todd, the person you saw in the first video, and asked her, am I in the ballpark with the understanding? Because what I did with the thesis is I started to apply, how am I going to communicate with these people based on what I know of the neuroscience? And her response was exactly the same response that you heard from Dr. Jay Geed, which was, it's very good, Rob, but remember that we're talking averages here, so you can't be too cookie cutter. And I get that piece, and I share that with you because it's going to be a little bit different for everybody else. Also, understanding the myelination gives you kind of an ammunition when you're talking to a student about drug use, vaping, which I know is a big deal around in Gadsden ISD, things of that nature. And the reason why that is so detrimental at this time, at this juncture, is because you saw that myelination is taking place right now. It is literally use it or lose it period. Dr. Jay Geed, he goes on to talk about how if we don't correct certain behaviors for students like drug use or vaping or things of that nature, then the connections they reinforce are those connections to be more dependent on it. So it's not just us telling our young kids, don't do that or else. There's a science behind it. And when I relay the science, when I help them understand that, now of course I'm not showing the whole video, but we have some talks with my kids. They get it, they understand. They don't want something that they think initially is negligible, right? I can do it and it's not going to hurt me. To suddenly be something that says, wait a minute, Mr. Forty's telling me if I keep doing this, right now, I may be locked into this for the rest of my life. I have family members that are locked into alcohol abuse or drug use the rest of their life. And so it gives you power when you're dealing with the students to help them understand just how detrimental some of those behaviors can be, right? Because they are going through a pruning process, I use it or lose it. Now, some other of the explanations. So again, if they're heavily relying on their amygdala to respond, they're going to be impulsive. They're going to act out. They're not going to have that rational conversation that we hope to have with them. So I had to change my approach. One of the things that was real kind of a striking piece for me was when I read the study that Dr. Deborah Young-Latad did. She showed these emotions, these faces of adults from fear, scared, happy, ecstatic, indifference, those types of things. So I'm going to ask you guys a quick question. And by the way, I repeated this study with my students back in Arizona. Exactly the same pictures, the whole bit. I did about 100 kids, asked them to come in and do the study, and my results were almost identical. I think Dr. Deborah Young-Latad's results on how the kids responded, they got the pictures wrong 92.8% of the time, and my kids got it wrong 93% of the time. So virtually identical, right? The one that they got wrong 100% of the time, which one do you think it is? Which facial expression of an adult face do you think students got 100% of the time wrong? What's that? Not where they're annoyed, where the adult is annoyed, you're saying? To some extent, yes, I guess you could say. Indifference. How many of you have your own children? How many times have you come home just been tired, dead tired, stood there, stared at a wall, blank TV, just needed a moment to yourself? You're neither mad nor happy, you're just tired, you're just staring off into space. What's the first response your kids ask you? Are you mad? What did I do? Right? They immediately go to, what did I do? Now think about that from a teacher's perspective or a counselor's perspective. You're sitting there having a decent day. You just happen to be off in your own headspace and a child walks by and sees you and you don't respond one way or the other. They're going to leave there feeling like they did something wrong. It's just a natural tendency because they don't understand it. I did that exact same thing with my best friend's son. About 3-4 years ago, he asked me to come out and visit him in Arizona because his son was really struggling. The kid's a genius. He scored a 35 out of 36 on the ACT, he got a full ride to University of Alabama. The kid is absolutely brilliant on paper. But socially, he's very awkward, has a hard time. He's a lot like Michael Kearney with the exception of he's not allowing himself to excel. So much anxiety, so many other layers to it. And I literally wrote down indifference as the answer to the question I asked him and told his mom, don't look at it, wait to see what he responds. And all I did was stare. We were sitting in a restaurant and I just stared right at the front door. And his responses were deranged, psychotic, pissed off. He said all kinds of things. And his mom's sitting there going, Jackson, really? What, psychotic, really? Like she's just flabbergasted, right? She can't understand him. And I told her, go ahead, Kelly, look at it. What is it? What did I write? And I wrote down indifference. That was my facial expression. And she was like, how does that happen? And I said, that's the problem. Is you're approaching him because he's so smart that he should be able to understand it and he can't understand it. So Jackson, let me help you understand you. And Mom, let me help you understand Jackson. Right? And so the relationship got a little bit better. The other thing is if I'm not careful about, and this is the thing that I had to, one of my biggest takeaways, is that I had to know that they were going to always be a little bit anxious. Even my kids that seem real secure, they're always going to run a little bit anxious, a little bit unsure, right? They're navigating a lot of new waters. Every year is different for them, if you think about it. And so I had to change how I addressed my kids. I had to change how I initiated those conversations. So let's talk a little bit more about what I would call the solutions. Now, the first thing I focus on is anxiety because, well, I've dealt with an anxiety disorder my entire life. My wife will tell you. There's days I think she wants to put me out to pasture, okay, because it runs very prominent in my family. So I've had to learn how to cope with it, how to deal with it. But also, I had to understand that the students are going to have a tendency to be more anxious just naturally and not know how to alleviate it. And you all have seen it since we've gotten back to COVID. Have they gotten better or worse? Worse in many cases, right? Even those kids that are like, I learned to just blow it off because of COVID, they're doing that primarily because of their anxiety, not because they learned a lesson that says, oh, I can just not do it anymore. They're doing it because they can't bring themselves to do it. That's that feeling of doom, low self-esteem, anger, sweating. And these are important to know and to recognize as counselors, as teachers, as parents, as educators. Because sometimes if we don't pick up on these cues, then we're not going to address the kid properly. Imagine that a student is running a little bit anxious. My niece, my sister spent thousands of dollars thinking that she had a physical ailment The reality was she had a little friend at school that the two of them were kind of clashing. And my niece is somewhat of an introvert, so the way that it expressed itself is through everything you see here. She got so sick, she couldn't even ride in a car, guys. That poor child had to carry a throw-up bag in the car because she would just be anxious all the time. If I don't address these things before, then I'm going to cause them to really be exacerbated. And in the end, what I'm going to get is some lack of control. And that lack of control sometimes is what? How do we see it sometimes? Think about it. In a school setting, the lack of control, what happens to a student when they just reach their boiling point? They get violent, they act out, they scream. Some of them, yesterday I had a young lady in my office that cried like I've never heard. She cried louder about a tiff with her boyfriend than I did when my dad passed. Because it was that real. She didn't know how to deal with that emotion, that feeling. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you next is about how do we mitigate this arousal. We call it arousal control. What do we do? Because if I can control this, if I can help, not control it, but if I can help mitigate it, right? If I can help them through this process and provide them tools, it's kind of like a doctor does for us. If they don't know what's really causing us the issues that we're feeling, what do? When a doctor doesn't know what's truly wrong with you, but you tell them you have a headache, what do? They treat the headache. They treat the symptoms. So in essence, until they're able to mature, until that maturation happens, most of us, the best we can do is help to treat some of the symptoms. And just that in of itself is going to help them feel a lot better, right? Think about it. If I don't have sweaty palms, if my mouth's not dry like it is right now, if I don't have tunnel vision, if I don't have to use the restroom every 20 seconds, and these are real signs. When those kids keep saying, I got to go to the bathroom, I got to go to the bathroom, they really feel like they have to go because they're so anxious. You'd be surprised how often I ask a student, are you just anxious? What's going on? Yes, well, blah, blah, right? All right, so let's get into some of the solution. So some of the solution, what we want to do is we want to control the amygdala to a certain degree and kind of do some desensitization, right? So we're going to talk about, and I'm going to get into, and I'm going to go a little bit fast because this presentation, when I was first approached to do it, was for a window of time that was about 3 hours. I'm not going to keep you for 3 hours, I promise you. However, my wife would shoot me, by the way, if I did. But what we want to do is, I want to go through each one of these, just kind of give you some tidbits, and then if there's more time at the end, we can ask questions or we can go into something a little bit more in more detail, okay? All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting and visualization, positive self-talk, arousal control, positive peer influences, positive connections and compassion. And then I won't really get into this piece. This is a piece I was using for a different presentation to just help students and help teachers understand you need to move beyond recognition to actual recall. If you think about what we do in the classroom, a lot of times what kids are doing now, especially with cell phones and computers and everybody has digital devices, they're not actually recalling the information, they're just recognizing it and then regurgitating it. They can't give it to you 2 days later or even 20 minutes later. But we'll get into that a little bit later. I will show you this next video because some of what I did is a summary of what the United States Navy did. So the United States Navy had an issue. They had a problem. In their Navy SEAL Academy, they were graduating 25% of their participants. That's not a lot, 25%. 25 out of every 100 were getting through and the rest were not. And when they analyzed those individuals that could have made it through, and in order to be cost effective, they had to get the number up closer to 33, 35% if possible. There was no, don't get me wrong, there was no thought about trying to get everybody to pass through because not everybody's cut out to be a Navy SEAL. Otherwise, we'd have millions of them, right? But they knew there were some that could have been Navy SEALs, but they were getting in their own way. And so they did what I'm talking about here, which is this arousal control. And see, what I'm now doing here at this point, as I'm developing my thesis, as I'm trying to be a better teacher, I'm finding all of this data and I'm trying to put it together to help me, right? First and foremost, I was trying to help myself because I didn't want to be El Gritón anymore. I needed to change that. So I'm going to show you that real quick and then we'll go through some of the solutions.
Consulting with experts, they came up with a groundbreaking mental toughness program, a set of techniques to boost the trainee's ability to control fear, even in the most extreme situations.
sorry, I don't know why that's doing that. It's not the computer.
Goal setting works by assisting the frontal lobes. As the brain's supervisor, the frontal lobes are responsible for reasoning and planning. Concentrating on specific goals lets the brain bring structure to chaos and keeps the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, in check.
I got up every morning and I said, I'm going to make it to breakfast. And then at breakfast I said, okay, I'm going to make it to lunch. And then I'm going to make it through the run this afternoon. And then you take it in these little sort of chunks.
The second technique, mental rehearsal or visualization, is continually running through an activity in your mind. So when you try it for real, it comes more naturally.
You practice in your mind first and imagine and rehearse how you might do in these stressful situations. The next time in reality you're faced with these situations is actually, in effect, the second time you faced it. So you'll have less of a stressful reaction.
The third technique, self-talk, helps focus the trainee's thoughts. The average person speaks to themselves at a rate of 300 to 1,000 words a minute. If these words are positive instead of negative, can do instead of can't, they help override the fear signal coming from the amygdala.
The frontal lobes are always on, so it's very easy to think about something difficult or something bad, like I'm going to fail. What am I doing here? I didn't practice enough. What you're trying to do is you're trying to replace those bad thoughts with good thoughts.
The final technique, arousal control, is centered on breathing. Deliberate, slow breathing helps combat some of the effects of panic. Long exhales, in particular, mimic the body's relaxation process and get more oxygen to the brain so it can perform better.
Now, I'm not suggesting that going to high school and middle school is like being a Navy SEAL, but for some kids it is. For some kids, every day, that anxiety is so high, they don't know how to understand it and get through it, right? So the next part of this presentation is some of the solutions, things that you can do to help mitigate that, things that will help you make better connections with the students. And then hopefully you guys will take it back to some of your educators and help them make better connections with the kids, right? If we can control that amygdala, if we can control it. Now, keep in mind, that presentation you just saw with the Navy SEALs is completely different from all the other three. They're not the same presentation. They're not talking about, it's not the exact same thing. So what does that tell you? That tells you that we're on the right track. And that told me when I came across that video that I was on the right track with helping my students out. Okay? Now, when we talk about these next things, they don't have to be great. We're not talking about something grandioso that in order to get them to really be great. In fact, this next piece I'm really kind of proud of because I will help you guys or help a teacher look like a champion and you don't have to do a lot, right? I will help you make connections and you don't have to do a lot. Here's what I mean. So fear, negative expectations, shame, and lack of understanding can lead to low motivation, low inspiration, and no action. So this down here represents what we expect of students when they come to our schools. We expect them to come to school motivated, we expect them to be inspired, and from that lead to the actions that we want to see from them, right? But if I'm scared in the first place, I'm unsure, I have low self-esteem, I'm very anxious about it. You know, my boyfriend didn't like my hair yesterday, so he didn't comment on the social media. My friend said I looked terrible in purple, and so I was wearing purple. Purple's my favorite color. Whatever the case may be that might cause them. If you are expecting them to be motivated intrinsically and then move on to being inspired and then take on the actions to being a good student or just being successful, whatever that means, it's never going to happen. The frontal cortex is not developed in order for them to even see it in the first place, so how can we expect that of them? So what do? We change that. We ask them to do an action, something, and it doesn't have to be great, something small. And we'll talk about, you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a little bit. But action is not just the effect of motivation, but it is the cause of it. Think about it. If I act, whether I wanted to or not, but I'm doing something different, and it leads to a change, then that could be inspiring, which could be motivating, which will cause more action. Think about it. If I start working out in the mornings, I hate it. I got to get up in the morning. I'm tired. I'm groggy. I get to class for the 6 o'clock class. I got to take all my gear. I got to do all this stuff. They're really small actions. It's not great actions. It's not requiring the U.S. Navy to complete those actions. But guess what happens over a little bit of time? Pants start to feel a little looser. My chubby cheeks start to go down. And now I'm inspired. And then all it takes is 1 or 2 people go, have you lost weight? Why, yes, I have. Now what am I? Have I just gotten more motivated? But I started with, I'm backwards. Right? Didn't I lead for the motivation? Didn't I need to be inspired to do that? No. Attitude will follow action, even if it's fake. So if I'm acting on something, if I'm doing something different, then the change could lead to a positive. So action first can allow for inspiration to be viewed as a reward. So now I'm inspired, and that's my reward. I feel good about it. And consequently, I've lost 55 pounds. So that was not making it up. That was really what happened to me. Okay? So this is, if you take nothing away from anything else I tell you today, if you can help a student just change a little bit of the action, whether it be breathing, that arousal control, setting a little goal for themselves, doing a little positive self-talk, whatever the case may be, you may have just changed a life forever because you've just gone from action to inspiration to motivation, and they're going to do it all. Remember what Henry Wong used to say? Do you guys remember Henry Wong? If you've been in education for a while, Henry Wong used to tell everybody that if you're leaving school tired and the kids are running out of there, you're doing it wrong. We want the kids to do the action. All you have to do is be the inspiration to the action, right? And it's not a lot. So let's go through some of these. Some of these I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because you've seen them. I'm just going to hit on some highlights. For example, goal setting. SMART goals, right? We understand what SMART goals are, specific and that kind of thing. The only thing I caution you guys with is you can't live and die by the goal. You can't try to take an adolescent and then write out this giant, hardcore SMART goal and think it's going to work. They don't get it. They don't understand it. Now, if you have the components of a good SMART goal and something that they want to do, you heard that one guy say, I wake up in the morning and I just say, make it to lunch. Then I get to lunch, and then I just got to make it to the end of the day. That's a goal. It's specific. It's measurable. Right? I'm just going to get to the end to lunch. Don't die for him. For some of these kids, don't break down, right? There's a great article if you want to. It's called Don't Live and Die by the Goal. It's called, it's called Goals Gone Wild. Don't check Girls Gone Wild. That's a totally different website, and you don't want to go there on a school computer. Okay. So we have to take that with a grain of salt. And then I'm going to show you a little bit about what I developed. It's called the bank type goal sheet. I'll share it with you guys if you like, but what we'll do with that is I'm just going to kind of summarize it. You can do something similar on your own. You don't need my actual goal sheet. A couple things. Again, I'll give this to Mrs. Forty so that she can pass it on to you guys. But some things that when you're talking about goals with students is you want to make sure that they are, first, not using words that are ambiguous. I wanted to grab something real quick. Oh, I don't think I brought them. Alma, do you have your keys on your lanyard? I forgot my keys. That's fine. Perfect. So, I want to lacks the power, then I will, right? So whenever you're talking to a student, we make sure that they are using words that we can quantify. We don't want things like good, better, harder. I'll work harder. I hear adults say that all the time. Well, just do harder. Let's work harder. Let's go. What does that mean? I don't understand that. You're asking a student to quantify that somehow. They don't know what that means. They don't know what harder means in terms of study harder. Right? What am I? I'm grunting when I'm doing it? No, it doesn't work that way, right? Can I get a volunteer? Oh, you're in the front row, so you get picked. Teach you to be in the front row. All right. What was your name?
Myrna.
Myrna, nice to meet you. All right, Myrna, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Will you try?
Try to put them on.
Yes, please. No, I didn't say to put them on the floor. I said to try to put them on. You know my wife's right there, right? She's going to give me. So why are you messing with me? Will you try to put the keys on the floor, Myrna? I didn't say to put them on the floor! I said to try to put them on the floor! Thank you, Myrna. It's all good. Do you understand the analogy? A lot of these kids, what I see today is they want credit for almost doing something. They want you to embrace them because they almost did it. Hey, did you guys know I tried to climb the Himalayas last year? I did. I Googled them. Isn't it the same thing? By the definition of our students, that is. We say stuff like try, and we give them credit for it. It's the worst thing we can do for them because they didn't actually accomplish anything. And it gives them a false sense. And kids love it, especially anxious kids. If I wanted to, I could have done it. So I kind of tried, but I didn't really do it. But you didn't really do it. That's the piece. Right? That's why goals come into play and really are helpful. Good catch. All right. Also, the other thing is, there we go, is it's really important to review your goals from time to time. You can't live and die by them. Do you guys remember what happened to Wells Fargo back in like 2017, 2016?
Oh, they were ripping people off?
That's right. But you know that wasn't because they were actively trying to steal people's money. That was all because of a goal. Higher administration for Wells Fargo put a goal on all of their branches that they had to open something like 35 or 40 new accounts a month. It was not feasible from the second they wrote that goal. But these guys were thinking about their bottom line. They were thinking about how they could line their pockets with a lot of money for their bonuses that they were going to get as it was written in their contracts. So they put all this pressure on branch managers. Keep your job or else. If you want to keep your job, you're going to write 30 new lines of credit every single month. When a large metropolitan area with hundreds of banks around the corner, that's very difficult to do. So what they started doing was they found somebody and said, oh, Myrna's got good credit. Why don't I just make up 2, 3, in some cases 11 accounts in her name and I get credit for it and I keep my job. The goal got out of control, and because the goal got out of control, they started committing fraud. We do that all the time, right? If I sat there and said, I'm going to lose 230 pounds so I can get back to my playing weight when I was in high school 60 years ago. Well, that's probably not going to happen, and I'm going to set myself up for failure. Does that make sense? Okay. This was my bank time goal sheet. The reason I just bring it to your attention, so I use the terminology that there's time in a kid's account. They have time. But if we expect them to understand that and know what that looks like, they won't. If you can help them see that. One of the very first students I ever did this with was failing his science class terribly. Barely passing everything else. When I asked him to list what time he gets home and how many activities he does in between, he immediately put down that he only does about 50 minutes of homework a night. You don't see it on here. It's just one this is an example of a different one. But then when I asked him to tell me what grade he wants and how much time he needed and when he was going to do it, that time went from 50 minutes to 2 hours and 20 minutes a night on his own without me prompting him. I gave him back the power. I didn't make it about me. I made it about him. The last time I saw that young man, he was running to go take his final because he had a chance to get an A in his science class. And guys, I didn't do anything. I didn't teach him any more about science, even though I was a science teacher. I never tutored him. I never brought him in after school. I did nothing than just help him see how he has time. Many of the kids will throw away everything they have to do because they feel like we're encroaching upon their time. They don't see that. Remember, their frontal cortex, that part that does that rationale, that planning, is not fully functioned. So how can we expect somebody to organize themselves in a manner that would make them successful when that part's not developed yet? It doesn't. It can't. So I had to help him see that. Same here. This is a freshman back in San Antonio that I did. Now, the funny thing with freshmen is, look at how much time he said he needed for some of these classes. But I don't question that. I let him do it. I let him see it. I can promise you this freshman, by the time he got done, all of these times had almost doubled. On his own accord, I didn't do anything. Remember I was talking about action leads to inspiration, leads to motivation? This is a little action step that you can do. It doesn't take you but 10 minutes to kind of work them through, help them see what they have available to them in time. Guess what? They're successful. They say, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, help me do it. Oh, that's right. Counselor extraordinaire. And all I did was help you manage your time just a little bit. Some of the other solutions, visualization. So I don't know if you heard in the presentation, but the human brain will process anywhere from 300 to 1,000 words a minute. Think about that. 300 to 1,000 words a minute. That's data that we can't even fathom, guys. Imagine what your kids are coming into if they're speaking that negatively about themselves. Right? So we need that positive self-talk. We also need them to help them figure out, what does a passing student look like? Or whatever the approach is, whatever we want to do that's improving on ourselves, we want them to visualize that. It's scientifically proven that if I say to my students, I want you to visualize doing a long jump, hitting the board, throwing your opposite leg in the air, reaching with your chest and your chin nice and high. When you get in the air, I want you to take both legs and shoot them straight out in front of you, and then I want you to crash land in the sand, bounce off to the side so you don't set your hands back. Can you visualize that? Guess what? If they visualize that, they are literally making neural connections to their muscles so that they can actually enact it. That's the first step, right, to success, is visualizing what you need to do. So for some of our kids, if I just tell them to visualize, what does passing Robert look like? Well, I'm sitting at home, it's quiet, I don't have my cell phone by my side, I'm doing my work, I've got my water there, I've already eaten, I've already taken my, whatever the case may be, if they can visualize that, that's an action step, they're going to be a little bit more successful. Clear expectations and outcomes. I was really surprised when I went back from, I was 7 years in district admin back to the campus level. I was really surprised at the 3 different campuses I've been in 3 years, don't judge. How little the expectations have become for students, right? I don't see teachers driving home the expectations of what they want, what the outcome wants to be. Now this one, and I know I see my wife getting up, so I'm getting short on time here, but this piece here is something that it's always been ruminating in my brain for a really long time, and I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about it. One of the things that's an action step that will really help your students is helping them understand what they're actually already giving you and what they need to do to be successful. Coaches are really terrible at this. We expect greatness to be something beyond 100. You hear coaches say this? You need to give me 110%. I've heard them say even, you need 150%. Let's stop and think about that a second. You guys know who Simone Biles is, right? The gymnast, one of the greatest all time right now, right? Imagine that she's working 6 hours a day in this intense training doing all of these things. If we were to follow this model, we were saying that in order for her to be the great person that she is today, she would need to do 9 hours. That's 1 hour greater than our workday. That's not feasibly possible, is it? Physics says 100% is 100%. We can't go beyond it. So how do you take a student who's not even managing 100% on the day-to-day to fathom something beyond 100%? They can't. Not only that, but we're doing them such a huge disservice in the fact that we're not acknowledging the 60% they're already doing. Now think about it. If they're already giving you 60%, if their grade is equivalent to the effort, and they're doing 60% in the school, what does it take for them to be passing? 10% more, right? 70? 10% more they're passing. That's not a lot. So what is greatness from 70 to 80? Even 90? It's another 10%, 15, 20 tops. But if you tell somebody they got to go beyond 100% in order to be great, they're going to shut down on you because they can't even fathom the first 60% they're already doing. We do it all the time. I have a young man that's coming into me. He comes to school 2 days a week, and the rest of the time he's at a drug rehab. He came into me, he's so anxious because he's got so many expectations on himself. And I said, man, I don't need you to be a 100%er. I need you to be a 70%er. What? I just need you to pass it, get your credits, bro. Don't worry about it. Because once you're successful there, I know you'll just keep going. You don't need to give me 100%. I don't need this great grand thing. You're fine. You're going to be fine. And the minute I told him that, guys, shoulders dropped, belly out. I gave him permission to be human. This is superhuman, and we can't do it. Not even the best of the best go beyond 100%. What they do is they do 90, 95%, and they do a 5, 10% more. A couple extra minutes here and there. Now, think about it. 10%, if I add 10%, let's say I add 10 minutes a day, times 5 days, how many minutes is that? It's 50 minutes. Have we just now increased our potential? Think about this. In the state of Arizona, when a student comes to you, if they have a B, if you get a student to come to you with a B, they don't have the numbers, they just use the letters. I don't know if it's like that here in Gadsden. But if they come to you with a B, what do you think of that student? As a counselor and I'm registering a new student and I see B's across their transcripts, what am I thinking? Oh, I don't have to worry about this one. Woohoo, all right. Have a good day. Now, what if I saw the number and it was all 79.5 across the board? What happens immediately in our adult brains? Oh, we got to challenge this kid. Oh, no. No, man, I need 110%. Oh, no. Wait a minute, though. Our perception's skewed. Now I expect more from the 79.5er than the B kid? It's the same thing. And now I'm going to expect even more for greatness? What I call this is an average, I call it moments of 10. The reality is if I can get a kid to move just about 10 or 15% total, just a little bit extra, whatever it be, the time that they're using or how they're doing it or their goal setting or arousal control, and then I get them to where they feel comfortable to have moments of 10 where they nail an assignment. They get really close to a perfect score or on that number line. What does the law of averages tell us? The more opportunity that I have to shine, I don't even have to get the 10, but I have moments of 10. Law of averages says I'm going to move up on this number line and I'm going to look better. I'm going to be better. I'm going to have better grades. But I don't need to be 110%, 120%, 150%. That right there, when I do that with kids, it helps them understand it so much better. I write it out for them. I show it to them. It's a relief to them, guys. They can be great and start to identify what it takes to be great. Because they don't understand it otherwise. For that matter, do we really understand it as adults? All right, we got a lot of other stuff to talk about, and maybe we can do that at another time. I'll give you guys a couple minutes for questions. Anybody have any questions? I want to be mindful of the next presentation, and I don't want to eat up too much of their time. No questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have those available, like for the elementary level? Because for them, I could see, they really do need that visualization at that point.
What do you mean? You said you're asking me.
Like your charts and stuff, like to kind of work with them.
I don't have anything specific, but I can make something specific for them, yes. So the question was, do I have anything available that what you saw today more geared to an elementary student? And I don't have anything specific at that, but a lot of what we're showing you here can be adapted for such because you just have to pare it down, right? Like for the bank time goal sheet, I probably wouldn't use that analogy as much. I'd probably just talk about my free time, my time, those types of things. But definitely I will put something together for you guys. I saw another hand.
Go ahead. So in elementary level, we were commenting earlier, what we see is, you were talking about the anxiety and getting the kids to take action. So we see a lot of the parents preventing the students from taking action. They become very protective. It seems like they've become more protected since COVID because they became fearful of losing their child or something happened. But now it's really hard to convince them to let the child take action, even just coming to school. If the child's not comfortable coming to school, they're having a hard time, especially right now at the beginning of the school year, then it's like, I'm just going to take my child home, sort of thing.
And that's not unlike the high school. So you were commenting about how a lot of the parents have become more protective. And I think it goes back to them not understanding the anxiety that they're truly feeling. They know they don't feel right. They haven't really put a label on it. And so it will help them if you, like we talked about earlier about a doctor diagnosing and finding, relieving the symptoms, right? We're not going to find a cure necessarily because we haven't matured, but if we can help them relieve the symptoms. And so if you approach it from that perspective, what your daughter or son is experiencing is generalized anxiety that we see all the time. I'm not a clinician, I can't diagnose, but she has all the signs or he has all the signs. So these are some things that we can do here and at home that will help that. Sometimes the parents are just lost and they don't know how to get those children over the hump. And then they get frustrated and they just come home, just stay home. Just get on there, be quiet. I don't know how to help you. It's unfortunate, right? I have a young man that just registered at my high school who hasn't been in junior high since, Well, he's never been in junior high. He's a freshman now. He spent 3 years at home, and their excuse was COVID. Well, you should see, they didn't even let the counselors take their kids to school. I had to very politely, very respectfully say, okay, COVID's gone. You're here today without a mask, so we need to kind of move forward with that. And I give the parent permission to allow them the permission, and that kind of seems to help as well. I think we have time for one more question. Do you have another question? She touched on it. Okay, great.
I was just going to add to that. I mean, at the elementary, that's very normal. That's separation anxiety, you know, and if we can talk to the parents and let them know that it's a normal process, you know.
Yeah, and you bring up a really...
But they don't realize that that's part of the growth, you know, that separation anxiety.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. There is a difference between emotionality and cognitive anxiety, right? If I'm having an emotional response because I see a picture of a snake, that's natural because I don't like snakes. But if I have a cognitive anxiety expression where now I am locked up because of a picture of a snake, now that requires a little bit more in-depth time, right? But your point is very well taken, right? Yeah.
Well, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we did.
Hopefully I'll get to come back, we'll get to finish it out. You gotta see the other two videos, so they'll laugh.
Okay.
Thank you guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.